Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have another recent reads video for you. So this is dating from my previous one, which I think was the 5th of April, to today, which is the 3rd of May when I'm filming this. I have 7 books to talk to you about today. April was quite a slow reading month for me. It took me the whole month to read basically 4 books because I talked about 2 that I'd already read at the beginning of April in my last recent reads video. Yeah, so I managed to read another 4 books in the rest of April, and then since May started 3 days ago, I've already finished another 3. Without further ado, let's just get into the books. So the first book that I am going to talk to you about today is Every Heart a Doorway by Seanan McGuire. This was gifted to me by Justine from I Should Read That. Thank you so much, Justine. I really loved this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars, I think partly because it was too short. It is a novella. It was a bit darker than I was expecting, which I really liked. It's a lovely fantasy world, kind of urban fantasy. I don't quite know how to explain it. So the premise is it's set in a school for children who have been to other worlds and come back, and they are trying to come to terms with the fact that some of them will never be able to go back to the fantasy worlds that they lived in. So this story follows Nancy, who has come back from a realm of the dead, finds herself at the school and starts to get to know the other young people there, and then a mystery happens that they have to resolve. I don't want to go into it because I think it's a bit of a spoiler really, so I don't want to give that away, but I love that close house mystery feel, but that was why it felt like to me it resolved too soon and I wanted it to be a bit more drawn out because I was enjoying it. So that feels like a slightly mean reason to knock a star off, but that's, you know, it's my decision. But I really loved it. I loved the concept. I loved the world building in so short a book, to get so much world building in that all the worlds referred to that the different young people had come back from all felt really real. There was really great representation in here as well of trans characters, Black, Asian, minority ethnic characters, neurodiversity, asexuality as well, which is not rep that you see a lot of. It's representation that I'm more on the lookout for. Could also say there's quite a lot of mental health rep in this because it feels like a lot of the characters are kind of dealing with PTSD. From my own experience with PTSD, trying to come to terms with a reality being different from what it was before you had your traumatic incident. So for these children coming back from a fantasy world that they loved into reality is a traumatic experience, and how they deal with that. I just found it really powerful, really moving. I'm really keen to carry on with the series. I don't know how soon I will be able to because all the books are these gorgeous little hardbacks, but that means they're quite pricey. So I've got the next one on my Amazon wish list and I will be getting it at some point, and we'll be carrying on the series at some point. They're companion novels as well, which I quite like. So the next book follows 2 of the characters from this book, but it's kind of a prequel, and then I think each book after that follows other characters that have appeared in this book, but not necessarily as sequels to this. Some are prequels, some are concurrent, I'm not entirely sure, but I've heard so many good things about this series. I was really grateful to Justine for buying me this, and I really loved it. Definitely worth the hype it's been getting. The next book was a book that I just picked up because I knew I would love it, and I really needed to read a book I knew I would love. So this was a 5-star read, obviously. This was Sightwitch by Dennard. This is book 2.5 in the Witchlands series. It's a prequel novella, so it is set before the first book, which is Truthwitch, but you're meant to read it at this point. So I've just read the second book, Windwitch. This is the point where you're meant to read this because it contains a lot of detail that will help make the next book, the 3rd book, Bloodwitch, make more sense. So this book follows Ryber, who appears in Truthwitch and Windwitch and was a character that I hadn't really thought a lot about, I must admit, and now I regret that and want to reread those first books to give her the justice she is due. She is the last Sightwitch at a secluded convent. All the other Sightwitches have been called into the mountain by their goddess, and she is the only one that is left, and so she decides to go on a rescue mission into the mountain to try and find out what has happened to them. On the way she encounters a Nebrevkan captain, but he's lost his memory, doesn't know anything about himself. It's really cleverly written. There is also, it's a dual timeline story, so there is also the story of Eurydice, who was a previous Sightwitch sister at the time when magic fully entered the Witchlands. So it gives a lot more more context to the story of the Witchlands, the background of how magic came into there, what the previous society was like, and gives a bit more context to some of the political stuff and some of the magical forces, what the stuff that's ongoing in the other books. I really, really love this. I think this is easily going to become one of my favourite series of all time. I'm so excited. They've just announced the title of the 4th book, which I think will be coming out next year. So I want to read Blood Witch, but I also don't want to read it just yet because of how long I know I'll have to wait for the next one. But I also want to reread the first 2. I don't have copies of those yet. I will probably buy myself copies of those fairly soon and read Blood Witch and then reread them all. I think it's a series I'm going to reread lots. I can't say any more good things about it really. If you haven't picked up Truthwitch, go do it. YA fantasy, but with excellent world building, really fast paced, loads of stuff happens, really strong friendships, really strong relationships, but not as romance doesn't overwhelm the plot like it does in some YA. It is a side plot. Really strong ships, both in the nautical sense and in the relationship sense. Really likeable characters, flawed but likeable characters, and you really root for them and want them to do well and succeed. Really, really love the series. This book as well also has some really gorgeous illustrations in, which just really added to the reading experience. I loved it. I really, really loved it. It was actually a really strong reading month for me because other than one really poor book that I read right at the start of the month, all the rest of the books were either 4 or 5 stars. So the next book I read was a reread, and this was Anne of Green Gables by Ellen Montgomery. So I first read this when I was about 11 or 12. At that point I didn't know it was the start of a series. I found that out a few years ago and have now collected the next 5 books in the series, so I wanted to reread this one before I carry on with the series because it's been so long since I read it. Again, was really glad I picked it up when I did. Really boosted my mood. Was having a bit of a rough week and this really helped cheer me up. I'd remembered some of the story and I was surprised actually by how much I'd remembered some of the key scenes that happen. Anne is just such a likeable character. I think that's why I enjoyed it so much when I first read it, because I was, I say, about 11, which is the age that she is at the start of this book, and I really related to her. I was quite a daydreamer and quite bookish, and I had a best friend that was much more pretty than me as well. So much to relate to in her story. I just really loved this book and I'm now really excited to carry on. So if you don't know, this book is about Anne Shirley, who is an orphan. She is adopted by a brother and sister called Matthew and Marilla. They actually wanted an orphan boy to help out on their farm, but in a mix-up of communication they were sent Anne, a girl, but as soon as they hear her story and what she's been through, they decide to keep her and bring her up and give her a better opportunity in life than she would have had if they sent her back to the orphanage or given her to another local family who were also thinking of adopting an orphan. And it's such a brilliant character. She has a lot of flaws. She's too much of a daydreamer. She's a bit clumsy, a bit absent-minded, and has a very short temper. She's also a little bit vain. And it's really lovely to see how she grows and changes and is really well brought up by Matthew and Marilla, and how they love her and support her and what a difference she makes to their lives as well. And it's classic literature. I really, really love it. Really happy to have reread it this month and quite excited to carry on with the series now. The next book that I finished is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. This has such a creepy cover and the cover really creeps me out. So this I got from the library. This is actually a collection of 4 of Henry James's ghost stories, The Turn of the Screw being the main one that takes up over half of the book. That one is about 130 pages, and then the others are between sort of 20-40 pages each. So the other stories in here are The Romance of Certain Old Clothes, The Friends of the Friends, and The Jolly Corner. So I picked this up initially because last October my friend and I went to an immersive theatre production of The Turn of the Screw set in a stately home. It was really cleverly done, but I was really keen to see how different the book was, and actually in terms of plot, storyline, it was spot on. In terms of how the characters, particularly the ghostly characters, looked, there was a bit of a difference between what is written in the book and how they chose to present it, but that's fine. I mean, they were trying to create a spooky ghost story, so I understood why they made those decisions that they made. What really came across in the book that we didn't get so much in the theatre production, obviously, is the book is told in first person narrative, so you really get all of the governess's thoughts and feelings, and it is less clear how much is in her own head than it was seeing the theatre production. That was a really good story. If I was rating all the stories individually, that one was a solid 4 stars. 2 of the other stories I didn't enjoy quite so much. So The Romance of Old Clothes was a little bit melodramatic for me. I didn't really like that one. And The Jolly Corner, I struggled to concentrate when I was reading it. So Henry James has quite a wordy writing style. He uses 10 words when 2 would do, really. It took me a little while to understand what actually was happening in The Jolly Corner, and I think kind of the impact of the story was a bit lost on me because of that. But the other one, The Friends of the Friends, I really enjoyed. I thought that was such a clever concept. So the idea was that the narrator has 2 friends, one man and one woman, who both had visions of a loved one before that loved one died. The man saw his mother, and the woman saw her father. Like, they were in a different country, they had a vision, and then they heard the next day that that person had passed away. The narrator wants these 2 friends of hers to meet because they share this special vision, but circumstances keep conspiring to keep her 2 friends apart. And the way that story plays out, I just thought was really clever and was a really good insight into the human psyche, as far as I was concerned. So quite a mixed bag, really. 2 stories that I quite enjoyed, 2 that I didn't enjoy quite so much. So overall rating of 4 stars. If you've not read any Henry James, The Turn of the Screw it's a good place to start, I would say. I mean, these are sold as ghost stories. The other book of his I read, which is A Portrait of a Lady, is more of a comedy of manners type story. So he has a great range of books. I mean, saying that, those are the only ones I've read so far. So I would be keen to read more of his books at some point. But as I say, he is very verbose. So if you don't like really wordy, flowery language, and if you're not used to reading a lot of classics, I wouldn't recommend him as a starting place. But if you enjoy reading classics, then these were very entertaining ghost stories, and not too scary as well, because I don't do scary. So those were the books I finished in April. We've got 3 books now that I finished in May. Some of them I've been reading for quite a while though. The first one actually I hadn't. This one took me just a couple of weeks to get through because I was savouring it. So this is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown. This was recommended to me by someone at work. We'd been talking about Brené Brown's podcast, which I'm really enjoying, and she said, have you read The Gifts of Imperfection? I said, I've not read any of her books, I've only seen her TED Talks. So my friend told me, pick up this book, The Gifts of Imperfection, and I'm so glad she did. I really, really enjoyed this. As I say, I was savouring it. I was reading just, like, all the chapters are quite short, so I was reading about a chapter a day and just really trying to sift through the advice and really take it to heart. This is a book that I'm going to reread a lot, I think. The central core of what Brené Brown talks about is shame and vulnerability. That's what she researches in, that's what she's an expert in. And what she talks about is the fact that shame tends to isolate us and make us think that there's something wrong with us, but when we're vulnerable about the things we're ashamed of, it actually opens us up to help us create connection and meaning in our lives. So this book is about creating connection. The tagline is, let go of who you think you're supposed to be and embrace who you are, your guide to a wholehearted life. So she talks about this idea of being wholehearted, and that is about courage, compassion and connection. Being brave about admitting up to the things that we don't think we're so good at, or the things that we're ashamed about, and that helps us connect to people, and being compassionate about caring about other people as well. So lots of really great advice in here, and she talks very openly and honestly about her own struggles, and because that's part of it, about shame wants us to build barriers around ourselves and hide, but connection is about admitting stuff about ourselves, and that's the doors for us to make connections with people, and being vulnerable with people helps us strengthen those friendships, relationships. Yeah, really, really loved this book. Gave it 5 stars. Gonna reread it a lot, and really was a really powerful thing to read at this time as well. There's so much going on, just to read something so uplifting and encouraging. The final 2 books are books that have been ongoing for a while, and they've been a bit of a slog to get through, but I've actually really enjoyed reading both of them. So the first one of these is Children of Dune by Frank Herbert. This is the 3rd book in the Great Dune Saga, or Dune Chronicles. I'm not quite sure what the overarching series is called. This jumps forward a generation from the previous book. The Dune books are about this desert planet called Arrakis, which is the main source of something called spice, which is a drug that basically the whole universe is addicted to by this point, and it's only found in this one planet. So the battle to rule and govern this planet is quite a political thing. These are science fiction books, but to me they read more like fantasy, and I was really struggling with the first book until I realised that to me it felt more like fantasy, and then I was like, oh, I get it. And it made a lot more sense. And I think that's partly because of a lot of the politics in it. They're very political books, very much about political machinations and trying to move your family into power. The other reason is there is some technology, but there's not a focus on technology, like particularly like computers. There's this suggestion that there was an uprising where computers tried to take over, and so all computers were destroyed, so they have human computers instead. The mentats, who are basically people that have trained their minds to think and compute through and figure out all the possibilities. It kind of feels like they're sort of superpowered people, which is why to me it feels more like magical society than scientific society. So it's sort of in that grey area between science fiction and fantasy to me anyway. So I'm really enjoying the series, but all the books are quite slow paced, and then suddenly a lot happens right at the end. So if you're not good with slow paced books, then maybe don't bother. But if you like quite character driven stories, if you like that sort of political thing, then I think you might enjoy these. This one got a lot more philosophical as well. I don't quite like so much like the philosophical parts. I like the action parts, but some of the characters I really enjoy, and the books surprised me as well. None of them have gone the way that I thought they would go. I'm gonna keep reading the series. I got this one from the library, but I actually own that whole series, but the first 3 books I had in a bind up. The other 3 I've got as in single copies, so I won't be needing to get any more from the library, so that's really good. So that was that one. I gave it 4 stars in the end. And then the final book to talk about I finished today. This was another 5-star read for me. This is non-fiction called Black Tudors by Miranda Kaufmann. So this is non-fiction. This is pretty much what it says on the tin. It is about people of colour living in Britain during the Tudor and early Stuart period. So a lot of people claim that for historical authenticity you shouldn't have black people in historical dramas about Tudor times, that sort of thing. Miranda Kaufmann and various other people have done a lot of research, gone through a lot of parish records, legal records, that sort of thing, and have started to uncover the stories of a lot more people of colour living in the UK, working in the UK at this time, people involved in trades, as servants, and the main thing is not slaves, like freed people. So it really shakes up the entire narrative we have of black history really in the UK, because it was only later in the 17th, 18th century when slavery became a thing. This book focuses on 10 characters that she was able to find the most information about, but also refers to other people that we have less information about. This includes a trumpeter in the court of King Henry VIII, a couple of sailors, a diver who was involved in trying to bring back the goods from the Mary Rose after it sunk. My favourite was a silk weaver called Reasonable Blackman. If that is not the best name ever, I don't know what is. A couple of servants as well, and a couple of free people who had their own independent means. Just brilliant, because the Tudors is a period of history we learn a lot about in school in the UK. It kind of feels overdone. It's the focus of so many TV shows, and I mean it is a really fascinating part of our history. It set the tone for everything that's happened afterwards. Like, the UK would be a very different place if the stuff that happened in the Tudor era hadn't happened. But we tend to focus on the big figures like Henry VIII mainly and his wives, and the big scale stories. And what I liked about this was very much people's daily lives, which is the fascinating part of history to me. But also we have a narrative about people of colour in the UK, and this really starts to unpick that narrative that white people have created. Of all the books that I've talked about today, this is the one I definitely recommend the most. Yeah, they're all books I've really enjoyed, all 4 or 5 stars, but if you just pick up one of them, I would recommend this one because it was really eye-opening, and I love that. I love books that make you re-examine the world, like look at the world in a different way, and this really challenges a lot of preconceptions that I had. So really enjoyed it. Yeah, so that was the latest 7 books that I've read between the first week of April and now the first week of May. Hopefully I come out of my reading slump a little bit and it won't be quite so long until I film the next instalment of these, because I aim to film them after every 5 books plus any that I read in between finishing the 5th book and having time to film. I've rambled on for quite a long time about those books, so I'm going to stop there. So let me know if you've read any of those books and what you thought of them. What are some of your favourite books you've read recently? So have a chat to me down in the comments about that. Please also like this video if you liked it, and please subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also click the notification bell if you want to know when I next upload. I'm trying to get back into a bit more of a regular upload schedule now, so if you want to be notified every time I upload something, then that's what to do. If you want more recent updates about what I'm reading, then follow me on social media. So I'm on Goodreads, which is Kerry Louise, and then I'm also on Twitter and now Instagram as @KerryLouiseReads. So go and follow me on my social media if you want to. All that information will be in the description box below for you as well. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!